Around 20,000 BCE, Earth was a strange world, almost unrecognizable compared to today. Present-day New York lay buried beneath miles of ice. The Amazon rainforest had dwindled to sparse patches, vast grasslands stretched endlessly, and the Mediterranean Sea had shrunk to nearly half its current size. Across the continents, harsh landscapes teemed with gigantic, bizarre creatures, as if stepping straight out of a naturalist's imagination. Imagine standing on land that would later become North America, now completely frozen. Woolly mammoths moved slowly but majestically, their massive bodies like moving mountains, tusks curved and glinting in the dim light. Not far away, enormous predators, such as saber-toothed cats with fangs longer than swords, prowled in the shadows. Further off, a short-faced bear stood on its hind legs, over 3 meters tall, roaring with a sound that shook the ground. This was not a movie scene or fictional imagination. This was Earth during the last glacial maximum. Humans of that era did more than survive, they adapted in extraordinary ways. They carved ice shelters, hunted giant animals for sustenance, crafted advanced tools, and produced intricate forms of art. Their primitive technologies, even tens of thousands of years old, reveal creativity and skill far beyond what many might expect. Yet the harshest challenge was not the cold alone. Global average temperatures dropped roughly 10 degrees Celsius below modern levels. The air was thick with dust, allowing only faint sunlight to filter through the haze. Winds blew constantly, strong enough to knock down an adult, freezing exposed skin within. Minutes, rain was rare. Snow was a precious water source, and most rivers had shrunk, creating a semi-arid planet segmented by massive, shifting ice sheets. Ice covered entire continents. The Laurentide ice sheet stretched across nearly all of Canada and the northern United States, miles thick, heavy enough to deform Earth's crust. Tens of millions of cubic kilometers of water were trapped in ice, lowering sea levels by more than 120 meters. Lands previously submerged now emerged, forming bridges between continents. The Bering Land Bridge connected Siberia and Alaska, while Southeast Asia joined the Asian mainland through the vast Sunderland region. Even the British Isles were once part of continental Europe. In this world, sound carried tremendous power. The trumpet-like calls of mammoths echoed across frozen plains. The growls of cave lions reverberated through valleys, and the footsteps of giant herbivores shook the ground. Mammoths, standing 3.5 to 4 meters at the shoulder and weighing around 8 tons, wielded tusks up to 4.5 meters long, both for defense and for digging snow in search of food. Ground sloths, the size of tall conifers, stood over 3 meters high and weighed nearly 1.5 tons, shaping the landscape with every step. Life in this era was not about huddling in dark caves. It was about adapting to cold, danger, and a challenging natural world. Humans hunted, exploited resources, crafted tools, and created art from bone and ivory, transforming a frozen planet into a stage for remarkable ingenuity. Herbivores of the Ice Age possessed claws sharp as knives, capable of stripping bark or defending against any predator daring to challenge them. Predators, meanwhile, were terrifying beyond imagination. Saber-toothed cats prowled frozen fields, with fangs nearly 18 centimeters long, designed not for ordinary bites, but to pierce the throat of prey with deadly precision. Short-faced bears, standing 3 meters tall on their hind legs, had muscular yet agile bodies, able to run at speeds of 64 kilometers per hour, with a bite strong enough to crush bone. North American lions were 25% larger than modern African lions, hunting in coordinated packs across vast plains. Species such as giant beavers, the size of small cars, built dams that reshaped entire river systems. Wolves hunted in large packs, 30 or more individuals, employing relay tactics to exhaust their prey. The biomass of these creatures far exceeded any modern ecosystem. Estimates suggest the total biomass of Ice Age megafauna was hundreds of times greater than today's large animals. Remarkably, humans not only survived among these giants, they thrived. They created tools and hunting strategies that astonish modern experts. Their survival depended on deep knowledge of surrounding ecosystems. The frozen world was neither empty nor simple. It was a complex network of plants, animals, and climate, where precise understanding determined life or death. The vegetation of this era, described by scientists as Mammoth steppe, was unlike any modern landscape. It was a rich grassland, with flowering grasses and legumes full of nutrients, feeding the colossal animals. Although atmospheric CO was only half of today's levels, the combination of intense summer sunlight during short seasons and unique climatic conditions created ideal growing conditions. Summers were short but intense, with nearly continuous daylight in polar regions, allowing vigorous photosynthesis. Winters were long and frigid, yet snowfall was limited, enabling vegetation to persist year-round. This ecosystem sustained not only individual species, but also vast migratory routes. Mammoths, bison, and horses traveled thousands of miles seasonally, carving trails into the landscape still visible today. For humans, understanding migration patterns, seasonal changes, animal behavior, and climate fluctuations was key to survival. They were not aimless wanderers, but astute ecologists, observing, predicting, and intervening in their environment. The tools and strategies they developed to navigate this world were the result of refined intellect and skill, not to be underestimated. By any modern society, the innovations humans achieved during the Ice Age were truly revolutionary. Beyond crude stone axes or temporary shelters, they developed complex tools combining multiple materials with sophistication that many later civilizations would take millennia to reach. Fire was controlled not only for warmth or cooking, but also for precise production processes, from melting raw materials to tool-making. A major advancement was specialized hunting weaponry. Tools such as the Otlotla spear thrower greatly increased throwing force and accuracy, allowing humans to confront animals many times their size. Spears were crafted specifically for each type of prey, using materials like bone, mammoth, ivory, or stone, both sharp and durable. Beyond survival, these tools displayed remarkable craftsmanship. Many artifacts demonstrate a level of precision comparable to modern artisans. Their clothing was also an extraordinary achievement. These garments provided warmth and resisted moisture through skillful layering and natural insulating materials, allowing humans to survive conditions that a modern person could not endure for even a few minutes. At the same time, clothing held aesthetic value, with patterns and designs reflecting social status, tribal affiliation, and individual identity. Shelters went far beyond common notions of caves. Some were constructed from mammoth bones and tusks, with spacious vaulted structures, large enough to house extended families. Others were dug into the ground, insulated with layers of hides and vegetation. These were not temporary camps, but long-term structures, allowing communities to inhabit them for multiple generations. Archaeological sites reveal continuous occupation. For hundreds of years, with layers of artifacts recording the development and evolution of these communities. Ice Age societies were organized with enough complexity to manage large projects while maintaining social cohesion. Groups had to balance the need for cooperation with limited resources, develop systems of sharing, resolve conflicts, and sustain effective survival. Archaeological evidence shows a high degree of equality, with few traces of extreme inequality. Compared to later agricultural societies, all members contributed to survival and benefited from collective achievements. Cooperation extended beyond mere survival. Humans created art, music, belief systems, and complex mythologies. Surviving cave paintings reveal how they observed and recreated the world around them, not only tracking prey and the environment, but also situating themselves within it. These artworks demonstrate precision and deep understanding of animals, combined with the ability to create three-dimensional effects using the natural contours of the cave. The placement and perspective of the images suggests that these experiences were not purely visual but a form of multimedia performance, integrating sight, sound, and narrative. The most impressive aspect of ice-aged humans was not their tools, art, or shelters, but their extraordinary adaptability. They survived severe climatic fluctuations that modern civilization would struggle to endure, coped with the extinction of the megafauna they depended on, and continuously adjusted strategies to face a changing environment, not because they were stronger or faster than the giant creatures around them, but because they were smarter, more flexible, and more creative. Every challenge became an opportunity for improvement. Every failure a stepping stone for a new strategy. This adaptability became even more critical as the Ice Age receded. Giant companion species disappeared, and the climate shifted to an entirely new reality. But that story belongs to another time. For now, focus on what Ice Age humans achieved in a world seemingly impossible to inhabit. They did not merely endure harsh winters, they turned them into allies. While modern humans seek warmth when temperatures drop, our ancestors read the frozen landscape like a living book. They predicted wind directions from the color of clouds, detected the presence of animals from the distant crack of ice. In a world where anything could be deadly, knowledge itself became a survival tool. A typical day began inside a shelter made from mammoth bones, with dawn light filtering through gaps in layered hides. Outside temperatures could drop to -40 degrees Celsius, but inside, carefully managed fires warmed the air enough that breath did not freeze immediately. The first challenge was maintaining the fire not just for warmth but as the difference between life and death. They created fire using special fungi, even in wet conditions. And fuel came from a careful combination of wood, dried dung, fat, and bone marrow, each burning at different temperatures and durations, providing light, heat, and long-lasting cooking capacity with minimal maintenance. The fire was the center of all activity. Around it, they shaped stone into tools, carefully balancing temperature and timing. They roasted marrow to maximize calories, smoked meat for long winter storage, and processed toxic plants into safe food. Fire also aided in treating hides and fibers, transforming raw animal parts into clothing, ropes, and waterproof containers. More importantly, it served as an information hub where experience was shared, observations from the previous day analyzed, hunting and migration plans devised, and knowledge accumulated over generations transmitted through storytelling and illustration around these fires. Social relationships were both complex and tightly knit. They created a survival network that combined knowledge, skill, and cooperation, transforming a harsh world into an environment humans could master. Yet what made Ice Age humans extraordinary was not just their tools, art, or shelters. It was their ability to organize and specialize within the community. They lived in groups arranged by roles, skills, and experience. With a complex and balanced system of cooperation, toolmakers were not mere artisans. They were engineers, understanding materials and how to manipulate them to create sophisticated implements. Hunters relied not on brute strength, but on strategy, able to read animal behavior and plan complex hunts. Food preparers were chemists, knowing how to turn raw materials into nutritious, long-lasting food. Children were not present merely for company. They learned trades from an early age, trained to reach high survival proficiency. By adolescence, they had mastered skills that modern humans might take years to acquire. Elders played equally vital roles. Their memory served as a repository of knowledge, recording animal behavior, weather patterns, and survival strategies over decades. In a world without writing, this role became the foundation of survival, helping the group maintain stability and resilience. Unlike modern societies, where rapid innovation can render skills obsolete, Ice Age communities relied on knowledge accumulated and passed down over millennia. Stability did not mean stagnation. These communities continuously refined tools, discovered new uses for familiar materials, and improved techniques through observation and experience. Initially, simple implements became increasingly sophisticated, with multiple components designed to work efficiently together. Some Ice Age artifacts still confound modern archaeologists with their complexity. One of the most significant advances was the development of projectile weapons. Initially, humans had to approach prey closely, extremely dangerous when confronting giant animals. The invention of throwing spears allowed hunting from safer distances. A greater breakthrough was the Otlotler lever device that tripled throwing force, combining knowledge of physics, aerodynamics, and human biomechanics. In addition, accompanying spearheads were crafted with precision for specific purposes, to penetrate thick hides, cause maximal bleeding, or be detachable for reuse. The crafting process required skills and precision approaching artistry. The maker had to understand the internal structure of different types of stone, control force and angle with exact accuracy, and visualize the finished product while still working with raw materials. All of these elements transformed weapon making into a fusion of science, engineering, and survival art. The level of skill required in Ice Age communities was so high that only a few individuals achieved true mastery. This specialization marked the first layers of experts in human history. Toolmakers were not merely skilled workers. They were critical members holding knowledge that could determine the success or failure of a hunt. They received respect, support, and resources to perfect their craft. Similarly, other specialists played vital roles. Expert hunters could read animal signs, predict behavior, and coordinate complex strategies. Weather observers could anticipate storms and plan accordingly. Children were trained from an early age to become capable assistants. This specialization turned the community into a tightly linked system, where each skill contributed to the whole. The group's success did not depend on any single individual, but on the coordination of specialized roles, creating interdependence that encouraged cooperation and mutual support. One of the most remarkable aspects of Ice Age society was how they confronted giant creatures. Modern humans can scarcely imagine living alongside animals capable of killing with a single swipe of a claw. Yet ancient humans did not merely survive, they turned dangerous animals into resources. The key was understanding the behavior of these species in ways nearly forgotten by modern humans. They distinguished which animals were dangerous, predicted their reactions from environmental cues, and even thought like the prey to exploit behavior against itself. Hunting a mammoth, for example, was not simply throwing a spear at a giant animal. It was a complex process requiring behavioral knowledge, meticulous planning, precise timing, and flawless execution. Hunters needed to understand herd movements, vulnerable points, reactions to threats, and how to approach without triggering defensive instincts. A hunt often required days or weeks of preparation. Hunting groups studied herds, selected targets, coordinated strategies, and utilized terrain-driving prey toward natural enclosures or positions with no escape. They operated as a team, with each person assuming a specific role within the overall strategy. Weapons were designed specifically for giant creatures, spearheads to penetrate thick hides and reach vital organs, shafts balanced for maximum throwing force and accuracy, and otlots finely tuned to increase power and precision. Even with careful preparation, hunting a mammoth remained extremely dangerous. Many hunters suffered injuries, broken bones, or deep wounds from encounters, but the rewards were immense. A single mammoth could feed the group for weeks or even months. Its meat was rich in protein and fat. Bones provided materials for tools and construction. Hides were crafted into clothing, shelters, and containers. And tusks became tools or works of art. Every part of the animal was utilized, demonstrating a combination of practical need and profound respect for the creature hunted. This process was a collective effort, requiring deep knowledge of anatomy, preservation techniques, and material handling. Meat had to be processed quickly to prevent spoilage. Some was eaten fresh, but most was dried, smoked, or frozen for later use. Bones were cleaned and prepared for multiple purposes, from tools to building materials. Hides were scraped, treated, and transformed into usable materials. The entire process spanned days to weeks, involving nearly the entire community. This collective approach both optimized resources and reinforced social bonds, emphasizing the deep cooperation of Ice Age society. Each individual contributed, and everyone benefited from the shared results. Hunting and processing a giant creature was a collective achievement that strengthened the group and ensured long-term food security. The social impact of this lifestyle was profound. These communities were not mere gatherings of individuals, but complex systems, developing mechanisms for cooperation, resource sharing, and mutual support. The harsh environment forced tight coordination, creating some of the strongest social bonds in human history. The group's success depended on the participation of all. There was no room for non-contributors, yet competition or individualism that could disrupt cohesion was not tolerated. A balance between individual initiative and group cooperation was maintained continuously through norms, rituals, and cultural values, emphasizing the importance of the collective over the individual. This system was not based on formal laws or institutions, but embedded in culture over thousands of years, encouraging cooperation and preventing conflict. The result was relatively peaceful and stable communities. When conflicts arose, they were resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than violence. In a harsh environment, disputes were a luxury the group could not afford. This stability allowed energy to focus on real challenges, finding food, maintaining body heat, avoiding predators, and adapting to environmental changes. It also provided a foundation for the development of complex technology and culture, creating a sustainable way of life spanning millennia. These communities did not merely survive the Ice Age, they thrived, forming a lifestyle fully adapted to one of the harshest environments in Earth's history. They demonstrated that humans could not only endure seemingly impossible conditions, but also build complex, meaningful, and fulfilling societies for their members. The greatest achievement was not surviving the winter, but turning the winter into a tool. While modern humans retreat to shelter when snow and ice appear, Ice Age masters read the frozen landscape like a book. They predicted weather from the shapes of ice crystals on Mammoth fir, identified wind-sheltered valleys by observing snow accumulation around rocks. They understood that in a dangerous world, winter was not an enemy. If used wisely, it became an ally. Imagine waking in a shelter made from mammoth bones, as archaeologists describe. This is not for dramatic effect, it is the exact structure. The frame was assembled from skulls, ribs, and tusks of multiple individuals, carefully interlocked like a prehistoric collection of timber. Walls were reinforced with multiple layers of hides, moss, and snow, creating insulation so effective that the interior remained warm even when temperatures outside dropped to -60 degrees Celsius. These shelters were far from crude. Every detail was meticulously calculated. The dome shape distributed wind and resisted wind efficiently. Entrances were always oriented to avoid prevailing winds, using natural depressions to retain interior warmth. Constructing such structures required exceptional skill. Each mammoth skull, weighing over 45 kilograms, had to be placed precisely, considering leverage, weight, and structural stability. Builders accounted for thermal expansion, creating flexible joints to prevent cracking or damage. Inside, the space was arranged with intricate precision. Areas for sleeping, food storage, tool preparation, and work were logically organized around the central fire. Floors were paved with flat stones or carefully fitted bones, providing both insulation and a stable surface. Some shelters even had sophisticated ventilation systems, allowing smoke to escape without losing heat. The fire was managed with extraordinary skill. It burned strongly and cleanly, generating maximum heat with minimal smoke. Fuel was a carefully balanced combination. Dried dung burned slowly. Animal fat produced intense heat, and marrow ignited brightly, suitable for delicate tasks. Firekeeping techniques allowed embers to burn for extended periods without constant attention. Charcloth and specialized tinder enabled fire to be started even under wet conditions. Fire was not merely for warmth or light, it was the community's information hub. Knowledge was exchanged here, observations of the day discussed, hunting, plans devised, and wisdom accumulated over generations transmitted through storytelling and performance. These stories contained information on animal behavior, weather patterns, survival skills, and social norms, serving as a vital educational tool in a world without writing. Around the fire, work was highly specialized. Master toolmakers were not merely craftsmen but engineers, understanding the properties of each type of stone, methods of heat treatment, and ways to manipulate materials to produce complex tools that were both durable and sharp, serving the dual needs of survival and hunting. Hunters did not rely solely on strength or courage. They were natural observers, reading animal behavior as if it were an open book. They recognized sounds, signaling an agitated mammoth, analyzed scents and air currents to locate a cave bear in hiding, and predicted herd movements based on seasonal and weather changes. Food processors went far beyond the role of ordinary cooks. They understood the chemistry of transforming raw materials into long-lasting food, knew how to neutralize plant toxins through cooking or fermentation, and preserved meat for months. Without refrigeration, children did not merely follow adults for amusement. They were students in a comprehensive educational system, trained to take on adult responsibilities. By adolescence, many skills had been mastered. Children could start fires in any weather, identify edible plants, track animal behavior, work stone and bone, and contribute essential support to the community's survival. Elders were not a burden. They were living repositories of decades of experience in weather, animal behavior, and survival strategies. In a world without writing, human memory was the only means of storing and transmitting information, making the role of older members indispensable. Respect for this knowledge helped build stable and enduring communities. Unlike modern societies where technology can render skills obsolete overnight, techniques for hunting mammoths, processing hides, and surviving harsh winters were passed from generation to generation with little change. Yet stability did not mean stagnation. Communities continuously innovated within established frameworks, creating new tools, discovering novel uses for familiar materials, and refining techniques based on observation and experience. Archaeological evidence shows continuous advancement, from simple tools to sophisticated multi-component designs that worked in coordinated, complex ways. Among technological advances, spear points exemplify superior craftsmanship. They were not just sharp stones, but precisely crafted for specific purposes, made with narrow tolerances. Crafting a spear began with selecting the right stone. Some retained sharpness longer, some resisted impact, and others were easier to shape. The maker had to understand each stone's structure, calculate force, angle, and intensity, and visualize the finished product while working with raw material. Once crafted, spear points were affixed to wooden shafts using complex adhesives made from tree resin, animal blood, and other materials. This required precise knowledge. The adhesive had to be strong enough to withstand impact without breaking, yet flexible enough to allow the shaft to function optimally. Every step, from stone selection to finishing, demanded meticulous, almost artistic skill. Shafts were not merely straight sticks. They were carefully chosen, treated, and shaped, balanced for optimal performance. The wood needed proper density and elasticity, dried correctly to avoid warping, and meet exact weight and balance specifications. Combined with stone points, this weapon system became extremely effective, even against giant creatures. A skilled hunter could throw a spear with enough force to penetrate a mammoth's thick hide and reach vital organs with remarkable accuracy. Some distances and targets would even impress modern archers. However, the most notable feature was not the weapons but the deep understanding of animal behavior. Modern humans can scarcely imagine coexisting with creatures capable of killing with a swipe or stomp. Yet prehistoric humans turned dangerous animals into valuable resources. They mastered the psychology and reactions of species, knew which animals were dangerous at which times, and predicted movements based on environmental cues. They learned to think almost like their prey, anticipating responses and exploiting behavior for effective hunting. Take mammoth hunting as an example. It was not a simple one-on-one struggle, but a meticulously planned campaign. Mammoths were vulnerable at specific times, during winter molt, after long migrations, or in the mating season when vigilance was reduced. Hunters understood herds' social structures, knew how to separate individuals from protective groups, and read body language when an animal was tense, relaxed, or preparing to attack. They predicted movement using terrain, sound, and environmental stimuli. A hunt often required days or even weeks of preparation. Hunters studied the herd, identified the best target, devised approach strategies, and coordinated the attack. They exploited terrain, driving the animal toward natural enclosures or locations limiting escape. Weapons were designed specifically for these giant creatures. Sharp points to pierce thick hides, balanced shafts for maximum force and accuracy, and otlots for high-impact throws. Even with careful preparation, mammoth hunting was extremely dangerous. A single mistake could result in death or severe injury. Many Ice Age hunters suffered broken bones, deep wounds, and serious trauma from these encounters. Yet the risks did not deter them. The rewards were immense. A single mammoth could feed the group for weeks or months, providing protein, fat, and essential nutrients for surviving harsh winters. But the role of the mammoth extended far beyond food. It was a mobile resource depot, supplying materials for nearly every aspect of life. Bones were crafted into tools, weapons, and construction materials. Shelters could be constructed. Hides could be transformed into clothing, shelters, or containers. Tusks were carved into intricate tools or works of art. Nothing went to waste. The entire animal was utilized, reflecting the community's deep respect for the environment and the resources on which they depended. Mammoth tusks were crafted into tools or finely worked artifacts. Hides were turned into clothing, shelters, and containers. Sinews and ligaments could be used for sewing or as binding materials. Animal fat provided fuel for fires and helped preserve food, while hair and fur were used for warmth or woven into insulating materials. Every part of the animal was used, maximizing resources while demonstrating profound respect for the creatures hunted. Processing a mammoth carcass was a collective effort, requiring knowledge of anatomy, preservation techniques, and material handling. Meat had to be processed quickly, some eaten fresh, but most dried, smoked, or frozen for long-term storage. Drying meat was not a matter of simply hanging it in the sun. It was a complex process controlling temperature, humidity, and airflow to produce food that could last for months without spoilage. Bones also required careful preparation, with each type suited to a specific purpose. Sturdy bones for tool handles, smaller bones for needles, and large bones for construction. This processing required detailed understanding of biological structures and material properties. Hides were even more complex. They had to be scraped clean, soaked, and treated with various methods to prevent decay, achieving pliability or stiffness depending on intended use. Some portions became waterproof materials for shelters, while others became flexible clothing. The entire process took days, sometimes weeks, and required participation from most of the community. This collective approach not only optimized resource use, but reinforced social bonds, emphasizing cooperation. In Ice Age societies, each individual contributed and all benefited. Successfully hunting and processing a large creature was a communal achievement, strengthening cohesion and ensuring long-term survival. These events also provided occasions for rituals, honoring hunters' efforts and the animals' sacrifice. Yet mammoth hunting was only one aspect of survival. Communities also managed plant foods, water sources, predator threats, and adapted to changing climates. Knowledge of plants formed an encyclopedic resource, identifying edible versus toxic species, processing methods to increase nutrition or neutralize toxins, and seasonal preservation techniques to ensure year-round sustenance. They knew which berries could be eaten raw or required cooking, which roots contained toxins that could be neutralized by processing, and which plants served as medicine or materials. Timing of harvest was critical. Missing optimal windows could cause serious shortages. They monitored dozens of species across vast territories, remembering growth locations and ripening periods. Some plants needed grinding, others fermentation, and some detoxification. Every step demanded precision. Specialized tools, and errors could be dangerous. Water management was equally challenging. In a landscape frozen most of the year, securing safe drinking water was a matter of survival. They understood which ice could melt into potable water, how to purify contaminated sources, and how to store water to prevent freezing. Skilled observation of the terrain enabled them to identify water sources in remote areas, ensuring the community always had access to clean water. Low vegetation along streams and near rocks indicated water presence, while animal tracks and movement patterns pointed toward vital sources. Ice Age communities could predict water locations seasonally and plan movements to maintain access to this critical resource. Managing predators was another major challenge. The Ice Age world teemed with dangerous animals: cave bears, short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, giant wolves, and many other predators. Communities learned to avoid active zones, recognize signs of presence, and take precautions when moving through risky territory. By understanding predator behavior, they knew how to respond to each threat. One essential strategy was the use of fire and tools for protection. Fires around camps and shelters provided security, deterring most predators. They also used noise, scent markers, and other techniques to keep dangerous animals away from living areas. The adaptability of these communities was remarkable. They survived extreme climate shifts, sought new food sources when old ones dwindled, and continuously adjusted survival strategies. When mammoth herds migrated, humans followed or shifted to other prey. As vegetation changed with climate, they learned to exploit new species. When water became scarce, they developed new collection and storage techniques. This flexibility was embedded in culture and social structure, not only transmitting technical skills, but also teaching problem-solving methods, encouraging creativity, and fostering continuous learning. The result was a sustainable way of life, lasting thousands of years. These communities not only survived the Ice Age, but thrived, creating lifestyles perfectly adapted to one of the harshest environments in Earth's history. They proved that humans could not only endure seemingly impossible conditions, but also construct complex, meaningful societies. They produced timeless technologies, art comparable to modern achievements, and social structures that promoted cooperation. Their greatest accomplishment was the ability to coordinate and cooperate to overcome every challenge. While modern humans view cold as an enemy, Ice Age engineers learned to turn winter into an ally. Frozen ground facilitated movement, cold preserved food naturally, and snow served both as insulation and as a building and shielding material. The sophistication and ingenuity of Ice Age humans was most evident in how they transformed enormous animals into allies, rather than merely hunting targets. This was not Disney-style friendship. It was precise manipulation of animal behavior, requiring deep understanding of animal psychology, enough to impress modern scientists. Consider the relationship with wolves. Archaeological evidence indicates that cooperation between humans and wolves was not accidental. Humans recognized wolves as skilled hunters, but unable to take down the large prey they needed. Therefore, they developed a hunting alliance. Humans used strategy and weapons to injure mammoths or aurochs, while wolves tracked the wounded prey over long distances that humans could not keep up with. When the animal became exhausted and fell, both species shared the spoils. This was not mere cooperation. It was a sophisticated system requiring communication, mutual understanding, and trust. Humans had to read wolf body language and hunting signals, and wolves had to become accustomed to the presence of humans. Over many generations, this relationship gradually evolved into the first form of domestication. Wolves were not the only partners. Evidence also points to interactions with crows and other scavenging birds. Crows, with their exceptional observation, skills and sharp eyesight, became natural scouts, helping humans identify food sources and detect threats, while benefiting from leftover scraps. Some studies even suggest that humans could exploit information from reindeer, using their predator sensitivity as an early warning system, close enough to detect signals without disrupting herd movements. This understanding extended across the entire ecosystem. Humans not only knew the timing of animal migrations, they grasped the complex interrelations in their environment: plant flowering times, insect appearances, bird activity, and the subtle cues indicating the movement of large species. Knowledge accumulated through direct observation and transmitted over generations reached a sophistication that modern ecologists would require decades to comprehend. Even with advanced instruments, even more impressive was the ability to anticipate and adapt to environmental changes. The Ice Age was unstable. Rapid climate shifts could transform entire landscapes within decades. Humans learned to recognize early warning signs, adjust hunting strategies, gather plants, and manage water resources accordingly. They predicted harsh winters from animal behavior, plant responses to temperature, and seasonal changes in water availability. This ability allowed them to stay ahead of nature rather than merely react to manage and transmit such complex knowledge. They developed sophisticated social structures, nearly resembling the first scientific communities. Specialists within the group shared information, observations, and experiments, forming an extensive network of understanding about the environment, animals, plants, and survival strategies. Ice Age humans built a complex knowledge-sharing system, verified through practice. Each group developed its own area of expertise. Some specialized in mammoth hunting, refining techniques and tools to take down these enormous creatures. Others mastered plant processing, transforming raw materials into essential nutrients. Still, others focused on tool-making, discovering optimal ways to use stone, bone, and other materials. What made them effective was this sharing of knowledge. Unlike modern competitive societies, these communities understood that information sharing increased collective strength. A sophisticated network of exchange spanned thousands of miles. When a group in what is now France developed a new spear point, the design quickly spread across Europe within a few generations. When Siberian hunters discovered methods for tracking mammoths, That knowledge eventually reached communities in Alaska. Archaeological evidence shows the simultaneous appearance of tools and hunting strategies over wide areas, demonstrating the existence of an intricate communication network. This network did more than share knowledge. It helped maintain genetic diversity. Small, isolated communities faced the risk of inbreeding. They developed complex marriage systems, moving young people hundreds of miles to marry into other groups. These unions not only created personal ties but built alliances, strengthening intercommunity relations. Children born from these marriages grew up multilingual and culturally aware, serving as natural intermediaries, helping maintain connections across distant regions. The combination of genetic and cultural exchange created significant adaptive capacity. When a group faced hardship, such as a failed hunt or harsh winter, they could mobilize allied networks for support, sharing resources, knowledge, and people. This system also fostered innovation. When groups met, they brought different perspectives, techniques, and ideas. Such encounters often generated breakthroughs unattainable by any single group. Archaeological records show that periods of rapid technological advancement coincided with increased cultural contact. Tools, hunting methods, and artistic styles appeared simultaneously across multiple regions, indicating that innovation was a product of collaboration rather than individual effort. This approach extended into art and cultural expression. Surviving cave paintings show stylistic and thematic consistency across vast regions. Animals are depicted similarly from Spain to Siberia, suggesting a shared artistic tradition and possibly a common mythological system. But these works were not mere decoration. They were sophisticated information repositories. The paintings recorded animal behavior, seasonal cycles, and hunting strategies. They served as teaching tools, knowledge storage devices, and cultural transmitters simultaneously, reflecting remarkable artistic skill and the acute observational abilities of Ice Age humans. The images on cave walls reveal meticulous consideration and deep anatomical knowledge by the artists. Natural contours of the caves were used to create three-dimensional effects, demonstrating an understanding of visual perception and painting techniques. The placement of artworks was deliberate. Many are located in areas with specific acoustic properties, indicating use as part of a multisensory experience, combining imagery, sound, storytelling, and possibly musical rhythm. Caves were carefully selected and adapted to enhance sound. Modern studies suggest that some of these sophisticated painting techniques would not reappear until the Renaissance. Artists used multiple pigments, perspective, and shading to create depth, even employing techniques that created the illusion of movement when firelight flickered. Remarkably, these traditions persisted for thousands of years with minimal change. Styles, techniques, and themes were preserved across generations, showing that artistic knowledge was carefully transmitted, much like essential survival skills. Art was not simply decoration or entertainment. It was a strategic component of survival, maintaining culture, conveying crucial information, and reinforcing social bonds. They built one of the first communication systems, using art to transmit knowledge across space and time. Their music was equally sophisticated. Surviving bone flutes indicate an understanding of complex scales and refined craftsmanship. Some instruments were tuned to specific pitches, playable in ensembles, while others show evidence of frequent use over long periods. Sound within caves was enhanced by natural echo and reverberation, creating a rich and immersive auditory experience. Music was not solely for entertainment. It also served practical purposes, enabling long-distance communication, coordinating group activities, or signaling during hunts. Rhythm could synchronize group movement in hunting or migration. Beyond practical functions, music reinforced social bonds. Making music and singing together strengthened community cohesion, solidified cultural identity, and integrated new members. Musical traditions were passed down through structured education. Children learned not only how to play instruments, but also the methods of crafting, preservation, and understanding of cultural significance. This ensured that musical knowledge was accurately maintained across generations. A similar formal educational system was applied to all aspects of culture. Children did not merely learn basic survival skills. They received comprehensive training, preparing them to assume adult responsibilities. Ice Age adolescents mastered skills that modern humans would find challenging. Education was not only practical, but also encompassed philosophy and spirituality. Children learned to hunt and use plants, but more importantly, they were taught to perceive their place within the broader ecosystem, seeing themselves as part of the natural world, rather than separate from it. Their holistic worldview was clearly reflected in spiritual and religious activities. Archaeological evidence shows they believed in a connected universe, where humans, animals, plants, and natural forces were all part of a larger whole. Spiritual practices were not meant to control nature, but to understand and harmonize with it. Burial rituals from this period reflect a sophisticated understanding of death and continued existence. Bodies were often placed with tools, weapons, and ornaments, indicating a belief in another form of survival. The careful arrangement of corpses with grave goods suggests that funerary rituals were conducted in an orderly manner, honoring the deceased while providing comfort to the living. Notably, these rituals also expressed compassion. Individuals who were injured or disabled, unable to fully participate in survival activities, were still cared for and buried with important items. Similar to healthy members, these communities placed high value on human life. Beyond practical contributions to survival, resources were invested to heal the injured and honor the memory of all members, regardless of ability. Their medical knowledge was remarkable. They understood bone setting, wound care, and the use of plant-based medicines to treat various ailments. Some skeletal remains indicate successful surgical procedures, such as partial cranial removal to relieve pressure or treat head injuries. Many plant-based medicines they used were highly effective, with several still used in modern herbal medicine, and scientifically validated. Their pharmacological knowledge developed over generations through experimentation and observation. However, their healthcare was not limited to physical treatment. Mental and emotional well-being was also emphasized. Sophisticated techniques were applied to cope with psychological trauma, grief, and stress. Community support systems maintained mental health through social proximity, shared responsibility, and collective decision-making, preventing isolation and despair. Rituals and spiritual practices also served psychological purposes. They helped process difficult emotions, marked critical life transitions, and maintained connections with the deceased. These ceremonies were not mere superstition, but refined psychological interventions, helping the community cope with the pressures of survival. Seasonal festivals brought the community together, reinforcing social bonds and providing opportunities for cultural expression, making life not only about existence, but also meaningful. Systems of gift exchange and material sharing addressed both practical and spiritual needs, ensuring fair distribution of resources and reinforcing social obligations. reducing the risk of conflict that could endanger group survival. Leadership. Structures in these communities were democratic and egalitarian. Some individuals had influence due to skill or knowledge, but there was no rigid hierarchy or autocratic power. Decisions were usually based on discussion and consensus rather than orders. This leadership style increased resilience and adaptability. When facing challenges, the community relied on collective intelligence rather than a single leader. Decision-making processes were widely distributed, allowing rapid and flexible responses to sudden environmental changes. Conflict resolution. Systems were sophisticated. Instead of punishment or violence, they developed complex reconciliation mechanisms, focusing on restoring harmony and preventing future disputes. In small, isolated groups, maintaining social cohesion was vital. Prolonged conflict or discord could divide the group and threaten the survival of all members. Dispute resolution processes were therefore designed to address the core issues rather than merely punish mistakes. Their economic system was based on sharing and reciprocity, not accumulation or competition. Resources were distributed according to need rather than power or purchasing ability. Wealth was defined by the ability to give rather than to hoard. This philosophy reflected the harsh environment, where long-term resource storage was impractical and transporting excess goods limited. Mobility, community survival depended on universal access to essentials. Simultaneously, it became an ethical value. Mutual responsibility and collective care were considered essential. Archaeological records demonstrate the effectiveness of this system. Little evidence exists of inequality or wealth accumulation. The distribution of goods and personal items was fairly even, indicating minimal disparities in material wealth. This principle of equality extended to gender roles. While there were task differences between men and women, these were based on practical needs rather than rigid hierarchy. Women were not dependent on men. They were partners in all survival activities, participating in hunting, tool-making, and decision-making. Some sophisticated tools and artworks from this period even reflect the skilled hands of women. They also developed comprehensive child-rearing methods. Children were viewed not only as future adults, but as valuable current members, with meaningful perspectives and contributions. The education system was designed to maximize potential rather than prepare them for predetermined roles. This approach created a creative, adaptable, and resilient community. When all members were valued appropriately, regardless of age, gender, or physical ability, collective potential was fully harnessed. Their environmental management practices were also sophisticated. They recognized that survival depended on the health of surrounding ecosystems. Hunting and plant-gathering practices were adjusted to avoid overexploitation. They took only what was necessary for survival, protecting reproductive populations and maintaining ecological balance. Archaeological evidence indicates that sustainable relationships with animals and plants lasted for thousands of years. Trees were harvested selectively. They cared for seed dispersal and ensured plant populations were not depleted. These principles were not merely survival techniques, but reflected a long-term philosophy of living in harmony with nature and community. Notably, they had a profound awareness of interconnections among species and the entire ecosystem. They understood that the health of each species depended on the balance of others and adjusted their behavior to maintain this complex ecological network. This ecological knowledge was carefully transmitted, passed carefully through many generations. Like any other survival skill, children not only learned hunting and gathering, but also how to carry out these activities in ways that protected the long-term health of the environment on which their community depended. Archaeological records show that the same hunting and gathering areas could be used sustainably for millennia without leaving signs of ecological degradation, a feat that modern society still strives to achieve. Yet their greatest accomplishment went far beyond mere survival through the Ice Age. They demonstrated the ability to build egalitarian, sustainable societies that provided meaning, purpose, and fulfillment for members, while maintaining harmony with nature. The challenges they address: the economic system supplying needs, democratic decision-making, peaceful conflict resolution, maintaining physical and mental health, living sustainably within environmental limits, remain challenges for modern civilization. Their solutions were not perfect, and they faced difficulties that are hard for us to imagine. Fundamentally, however, they created a successful way of life, surviving, thriving, producing beauty and meaning, leaving a legacy that still influences humans today. Around 15,000 years ago, during a major transitional period, the world they had mastered for millennia began to change in unpredictable ways. Massive ice sheets, which had dominated the landscape for thousands of years, retreated rapidly, reshaping continents within a few generations. Rivers that had once been solid ice surged to life, carving new channels into rock and soil, disrupting landscapes that had been stable for ages. And this transformation was not merely physical. Entire ecosystems that once sustained giant species began to collapse. Vast grasslands fragmented and disappeared as forests gradually advanced. Imagine this: you are a mammoth hunter, familiar with every migration route, seasonal pattern, and the peculiar behaviors of these enormous creatures. Your entire life, tools, social structures, and spiritual beliefs revolve around them. Then, within a few decades, they begin to vanish. Archaeological evidence tells a story both tragic and inspiring. As megafauna populations collapsed, Ice Age communities did not passively accept the loss. They adapted at an unprecedented pace, restructuring survival strategies and finding ways to continue living in a profoundly changing world. Their creativity became key to shaping the modern era. These innovators, seemingly slow-moving at first glance, had to completely reshape survival strategies, develop new technologies, and construct entirely new ways of life. The immediate challenge was diet. After millennia of hunting massive creatures, their disappearance left a large protein gap not easily replaced. Surviving communities were those able to quickly switch to hunting smaller species, develop new techniques, and expand plant-based food sources. But this was not merely a change in diet. It was a shift in how they thought about food. Hunting systems that once relied on taking down large animals to provide for the group over long periods had to give way to continuous hunting, small kills, and more sophisticated food processing. Technological adaptation was equally urgent. Sturdy spears that once pierced mammoth hides became useless overnight. Tools optimized for giant prey had to be redesigned for smaller, faster, and more agile animals. Even shelters had to be reconstructed, as mammoth bones their primary building. Material became scarce. But the greatest challenge lay in society. Large, single hunts that had supported stable, long-term community settlements now had to transition to smaller, mobile groups, exploiting resources more widely and efficiently. Extended family networks, leadership systems, and even mating practices had to be restructured. Many communities did not survive this transition. Locations continuously occupied for millennia were suddenly abandoned. Tool traditions disappeared, and multi-generational art suddenly changed. Yet the communities that endured displayed remarkable resilience. They developed more sophisticated hunting techniques, crafted lighter, more mobile and flexible tools, and expanded trade networks, becoming more complex than any Ice Age society before. The bow and arrow perfected during this period were not only new tools, but a revolution in hunting strategy, allowing small groups to take down large prey with unprecedented efficiency and safety. Fishing technology also advanced as communities exploited aquatic resources to make up for lost protein. Nets, hooks, traps, and efficient harvesting tools were developed, almost industrializing the collection of aquatic species. Food processing systems improved as well. Fermentation techniques increased nutritional value and allowed for long-term preservation. Most notably, they began experimenting with what could be considered the precursors of agriculture. Some communities tended wild plants, planting intentionally, marking the earliest steps toward food production rather than mere foraging. This was not a sudden invention, but an accumulation over millennia, with countless small innovations arising from survival needs during times of crisis. Even artistic traditions transformed, reflecting profound changes in how communities adapted and recreated culture in the New World. During this period, changes in art became apparent. Cave paintings that had previously focused on giant animals began featuring more human figures, reflecting a shift in how communities perceived their relationship with the natural world. Depicted creatures became smaller, more diverse, and abstract. Forms and symbols appeared, suggesting that human consciousness was expanding into spiritual and mythological dimensions rather than remaining solely on empirical observation. Detailed representations of animals gradually gave way to stylized forms emphasizing mythological or spiritual significance. A similar transformation occurred in tools. Standardized tools that had existed for millennia began to diversify into regional variants suited to different environments and hunting goals, creating technological diversity never seen before. Social structures also became more complex. Previously, egalitarian communities began to develop specialized roles, with individuals becoming experts in specific techniques or resources, forming the first layers of specialization. Large, semi-permanent Ice Age settlements gradually gave way to smaller, more mobile groups that exploited dispersed resources efficiently. Yet these groups remained connected through trade networks and marriage alliances, forming extended social units larger than before. Spiritual activities adapted to these changes as well. Instead of focusing solely on animals, beliefs began to incorporate trees, landscapes, and environmental elements, reflecting the new significance of these resources. Some communities developed complex rituals surrounding planting and harvesting, emphasizing the bond between humans and the environment. Most importantly, it was the way they thought about change. Their previous worldview had assumed long-term stability, but the post-Ice Age world forced them to adapt to uncertainty. The ability to accept transformation and unpredictability became a critical survival factor, sometimes even more important than perfect traditional techniques. Archaeological records show that this period was tense for many communities. Skeletal remains indicate poor nutrition, increased disease, and rising violence, while art reflects themes of conflict and uncertainty, previously unseen during the Ice Age. Yet it was also a period of remarkable creativity and innovation. The pace of technological change accelerated dramatically as communities experimented with new solutions to survival challenges. Cultural diversity expanded as groups adapted differently to the new environment. Genetic data showed that previous population bottlenecks gave way to rapid population growth, enabled by new food sources and more effective survival strategies. Increased population density created opportunities for cultural exchange, fostering innovation. Trade networks developed extensively and complexly, moving materials and ideas across continents at unprecedented speeds, creating cultural connections beyond any prior limits. However, this level of connectivity also brought new challenges, requiring humans to learn coordination and adaptation in an increasingly interconnected and dynamic world. Yet this connection between communities created unprecedented risks. Groups that had once been self-sufficient during the Ice Age now relied on trade networks, which could be disrupted by environmental changes or social conflict. The collapse of one group could trigger a domino effect, impacting an entire region. Archaeological evidence shows that this period was marked by cycles of expansion and contraction. Communities that adapted well to new conditions spread quickly through exchange networks, while environmental instability or social conflict could disrupt or collapse entire cultural systems. Storage technologies became essential. The ability to preserve food long-term provided a significant survival advantage, while also driving innovations in processing, storage, and preservation. Foundation for the first steps toward agriculture. Construction also evolved. Huts made from mammoth bones gave way to diverse shelters, adapted to different climates and available materials. Some communities developed year-round settlements, marking the beginnings of permanent habitation. The most significant innovations appeared in the social realm. Rising population density and resource competition imposed new pressures, requiring communities to develop more sophisticated negotiation, reconciliation, and alliance-building strategies. Evidence indicates that warfare became more common, but diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution also improved in parallel. Groups maintaining cooperation with neighbors gained a clear survival advantage over communities, relying solely on competition, leadership. Structures became more sophisticated. Informal leadership systems of the Ice Age gradually transitioned to roles with clear responsibilities, forming the first organized institutions. Yet power remained based on skill and knowledge, controlled through consensus and tradition, rather than inherited status or wealth. Education and vocational training also evolved. Children received specialized training from an early age, forming the first professional systems and ensuring more effective knowledge transfer. Information systems became sophisticated, using symbols, signals, and complex messages to coordinate activities across wide regions and diverse groups. More importantly, communities began to change their perspective on the future. The Ice Age worldview had focused on maintaining traditional patterns, whereas the post-Ice Age world required the ability to plan long-term and anticipate unprecedented challenges. This mindset regarding time and change was revolutionary, allowing communities capable of predicting and preparing for long-term shifts to survive more effectively. This transitional period laid the foundation for all subsequent human advances. Improvements in technology, social organization, and cultural expression not only enabled humans to adapt to a changing environment, but also created the basis for the sustainable development of post-Ice Age society. The agricultural revolution, the emergence of large settlements, and ultimately the formation of modern civilization all trace back to this period. Yet it was also a time of profound loss. The close connection with nature, which had defined Ice Age societies, began to weaken as communities shifted toward controlling the environment rather than harmonizing with it. Spiritual and experiential bonds with the land and its species, maintained over millennia, gradually faded as humans sought technological solutions to survival challenges. The comprehensive worldview, which saw humans as an integral part of nature, began to give way to a dualistic perspective, humans as separate from and superior to nature. The egalitarian social structures, characteristic of the Ice Age, began to fracture as resource competition increased and specialized roles became important. Inequality in wealth and status emerged as some individuals controlled critical resources or technologies. Nevertheless, communities that survived this transitional period demonstrated extraordinary adaptability and creativity. Change, no matter how profound, became an opportunity for growth and innovation rather than merely a threat to survival. The legacy of this period still shapes human capacities today, the ability to adapt quickly to new circumstances, innovate in response to challenges, and maintain social cooperation under stress. The story of post-Ice Age pioneers reminds us that surviving major change depended not only on individual skill or knowledge, but also on the ability to sustain cooperation and mutual support. Communities survived by sharing resources, coordinating actions, and helping each other through difficult transitions. This insight is particularly relevant when considering today's environmental and social challenges. The story of post-Ice Age humans demonstrates that human ingenuity and cooperation can overcome fundamental threats to way of life, but only when adaptation, innovation, and mutual support are present. The end of the Ice Age not only marked the conclusion of a chapter in human history, but also opened the door to all subsequent possibilities. The skills, technologies, and social structures developed during this period became the foundation for agriculture, cities, writing, and the modern world at the same time. It is a reminder that no way of life lasts forever. The ability to adapt to change is always more important than maintaining any old pattern. The masters of the Ice Age had created an almost perfect adaptation to their environment. Yet when that landscape transformed, survival demanded the courage to abandon old habits and embrace new possibilities. Their story continues to live in the archaeological record, each new discovery revealing how these extraordinary communities navigated one of the most challenging periods in human history. Every artifact, every new analysis adds another piece to the larger picture of how our ancestors turned crisis into opportunity while laying the foundation for all subsequent developments. But the deepest lesson from their story is the extraordinary capacity of human creatures capable of far more than commonly imagined. Faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, they innovated, adapted, and developed new solutions, not only addressing immediate problems, but opening entirely new possibilities for the future. The post-Ice Age pioneers did not merely survive immediate existential threats. They built a new order. In the process, they demonstrated that human cooperation and creativity could overcome any obstacle, regardless of its severity or fundamental nature. Their legacy remains present in every initiative, every act of collaboration, and every moment when we choose adaptation over surrender. They remind us that humanity descends from those who confronted the impossible and made it possible, those who turned crisis into opportunity, always believing that the future could surpass the past. By studying their world and learning from their achievements, we discover not only how they lived, but also lessons in creativity, resilience, and the steadfast belief that humans can overcome any challenge through collective effort. The story of the Ice Age and its aftermath is not merely ancient memory. It is a guide for life, showing how we can face our own challenges and create opportunities for growth and innovation. The skills, wisdom, and courage they left behind continue to inspire and provide critical knowledge for human development today. Importantly, they did not simply survive. They demonstrated how to thrive in the face of adversity, turning obstacles into opportunities and building the future from the fragments of the past. Their story becomes our story, and their achievements are our legacy. Learning how they lived teaches us to live meaningfully, creatively, with the unwavering belief that no challenge is too great if humans cooperate to overcome it. But the next phase would be harsher than any previous challenge. This period was not just environmental change, it was the complete restructuring of Earth's ecological rules. The Great Die-Off began, erasing not just individual species, but entire evolutionary branches that had existed for millions of years. Imagine vast prairies across the North American Midwest, yet landscapes defying every assumption about the continent. Giant sloths moved through oak forests, their claws etched into tree trunks as if carved by modern engineers. Cheetah-like predators chased antlered deer at terrifying speeds. Giant beavers, the size of black bears, built dams that would astonish contemporary engineers. That was not all. Predators such as short-faced bears over 3 meters tall patrolled territories as large as small nations. North American lions, 25% larger than African lions, coordinated hunts with complete tactics. Wolves hunted in packs of 30, their jaws capable of crushing the bones of enormous prey. Not only North America, on every continent except Antarctica, similar scenes unfolded. In Australia, giant marsupial lions and bears rivaled the size of hippopotamuses. South America was home to saber-toothed cats with fangs capable of piercing skulls. Even islands hosted giants, dwarf elephants in the Mediterranean, giant Caribbean tortoises, and flightless birds in New Zealand taller than modern basketball players. The figures are staggering. Paleontologists estimate that the biomass of large animals at the end of the Ice Age was roughly 10 times greater than today. Today, the Earth appears as a preserved wild world where ecosystems that once supported megafauna were stronger than any African savanna. Yet the story quickly darkens. Between roughly 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, lands that had been biological paradises began to collapse. Extinction did not occur gradually, nor was it random. Instead, it followed a consistent, almost mathematical pattern, like a forensic investigation with a single suspect: humans. Evidence written in bones tells a story that overshadows any detective novel. Every time humans arrived in a new land, local megafauna disappeared with astonishing precision. When humans arrived in Australia 50,000 years ago, within 10,000 years, 90% of large species were gone. In the Americas, after 15,000 years, 80% of megafaunal biomass vanished in just 3,000 years. Madagascar lost all its large species within 1,000 years of human arrival 2,000 years ago. This was not gradual climate change or a mysterious disease. It was a systematic wave of extinction, following the human migration footprint with military-like precision. This makes the story both tragic and compelling. The first humans were not bloodthirsty killers. They were simply extraordinarily skilled at what they did. The hunting technologies and strategies they developed were so efficient and precise that they exploited the vulnerabilities of giant animals without killing more than necessary. Modern mathematical models and simulations show that a hunting party of only about 100 people, each killing one mammoth per year, could drive the species to extinction in 300 years. A sustainable method by rational standards. Yet given the slow reproductive rate of large animals, even modest hunting pressure became a death sentence. Humans turned hunting into an optimized art, targeting the most vulnerable individuals, such as the young, the old, or pregnant females. They could drive herds into cliffs, natural bottlenecks, or use fire to guide prey towards slaughter zones, where spear-wielding hunters waited like an ancient assembly line. At archaeological sites such as Olson Chubbuck in Colorado, evidence shows over 200 bison killed in a single hunt, their bones systematically cut as in industrial processing. These were not desperate people. They were master hunters, turning death into science. The psychological impact of this phenomenon is almost unimaginable. Imagine being the last person to witness a world teeming with giant creatures, trying to recount it to descendants while the ground trembles beneath colossal footsteps. The sky is darkened by flocks of birds large enough to obscure the sun, and every forest conceals danger from massive predators. Indigenous myths across the globe preserve fragments of this memory, stories of giants that once walked alongside humans, of a time when Earth teemed with creatures now extinct. These are cultural traumas, a type of collective memory of loss passed down through generations. Archaeological evidence supports this perspective. Human art changed dramatically. Vivid depictions of megafauna symbols of the ice age gradually gave way to abstract images, quietly reflecting the disappearance of the enormous creatures that had shaped human life for millennia. Cave paintings increasingly yielded to abstract, symbolic forms rather than realistic depictions. Animals appeared smaller, more diverse, and stylized, as if memories of giant creatures had transformed into legend within collective consciousness. Technology changed in parallel. Massive spears, designed to quickly bring down mammoths, became obsolete, replaced by tools optimized for hunting smaller animals. Even shelters had to adapt. As mammoth bones, the primary material for Ice Age dwellings, became scarce. Yet the most profound changes occurred in social structures. Communities, once stable and reliant on megafauna hunting, had to reorganize into smaller, more mobile groups, flexible in exploiting scattered resources. This process was stressful, and archaeological evidence indicates increased nutritional stress, disease, and violence. The certainty and stability of Ice Age life gave way to unpredictability and fierce competition for survival in a changing environment. Innovation emerged as a necessary response. The pace of technological change accelerated as communities experimented with new solutions, rapid hunting tools, plant processing techniques, and the first deliberate attempts at cultivation. Those who adapted quickly not only survived but thrived, improving hunting methods, increasing plant processing efficiency, and building trade networks to transport resources over long distances. Fishing technology became central. As large terrestrial animals disappeared, communities turned to aquatic environments, exploiting fish and shellfish with hooks, traps, nets, and weirs, maximizing the protein they could harvest. Plant processing methods also advanced. Previously, inedible wild plants were prepared for nutrition. Fermentation increased food value, and long-term storage systems were developed. Even deliberate cultivation experiments appeared, the beginnings of agriculture, not as a sudden invention, but gradually, over millennia, through countless small innovations and adaptations to survival crises. Spirituality and ritual also transformed. Communities that had once venerated megafauna began incorporating plants and landscapes, reflecting the new importance of these resources. Some developed complex rituals around planting and harvesting, while others established rules, taboos, or hunting ceremonies aimed at maintaining ecological balance or appeasing animal spirits. Burial rituals from this period show increasing social complexity and hierarchy, with specialized roles and distinctions in status emerging within previously egalitarian Ice Age communities. In the new reality of survival, some individuals became masters of specific skills and technologies, creating the first professional classes in human history. Networks for exchanging goods and ideas spread further than ever before, crossing continents and creating unprecedented cultural connections. Yet with this connectivity came new vulnerabilities. Communities that had once been during the Ice Age now depended on fragile trade relations, easily disrupted by environmental change or social conflict. The collapse of one community could trigger a domino effect across an entire region. Genetic evidence reflects a similar process. Population bottlenecks of the Ice Age gave way to rapid population growth as communities adapted to new food sources and developed more effective survival strategies. Increased population density created opportunities for cultural exchange and innovation, but also generated new conflicts. Competition for scarce resources intensified as communities adjusted to a world with fewer giant animals and more people. Warfare became more common, yet diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution continued alongside it. Leadership structures evolved and became more complex. Leadership roles were no longer simple, requiring expertise, knowledge, and coordination. Ability. Post-Ice Age governance introduced formal roles with clear responsibilities, marking the emergence of the first organizational systems. Simultaneously, education systems developed to transmit specialized knowledge more effectively. Children were trained from an early age, honing specific skills and forming the first professional classes. The development of sophisticated communication became essential for survival, enabling communities to coordinate across wide areas and diverse groups. More importantly, these communities began to develop a new way of thinking about the future. The Ice Age worldview, focused on maintaining traditions and cyclic adaptation, gradually gave way to the capacity for foresight, long-term planning, and anticipating unprecedented challenges. This shift in temporal awareness was revolutionary. On par with any technological innovation, communities capable of anticipating upcoming changes survived more effectively than those focused solely on immediate needs. This transitional period laid the foundation for all subsequent progress, from technology and social structures to cultural expressions. These innovations became the basis for the agricultural revolution, the rise of cities, and ultimately modern civilization. Yet alongside progress came profound loss. The close relationship with nature, characteristic of Ice Age societies, began to fracture. Communities gradually shifted focus from adapting to the environment toward controlling and manipulating it. Spiritual and emotional connections with the land and animals, maintained for thousands of years, weakened, giving way to technological solutions for survival challenges. The comprehensive worldview, which saw humans as part of nature, slowly changed, forming a dualistic perspective. Humans are separate from and superior to the environment. Egalitarian social structures of the Ice Age also began to unravel. Resource competition, specialized roles, and status differences grew in importance, paving the way for new forms of social organization. Professional roles and stratification within communities became more significant than ever. For the first time in history, inequality in status and power emerged clearly as certain individuals controlled valuable resources or survival-critical technologies. The environmental consequences were profound. The disappearance of megafauna not only reduced the number of large animals, but also disrupted ecosystems that had been shaped by them for millions of years. Vast grasslands, once maintained by herds of colossal mammoths, gradually gave way to forests. Plant species dependent on large animals for seed dispersal also declined. Nutrient cycles established over millions of years were broken, altering soil chemistry and the structure of plant communities across entire continents. Some studies suggest that methane emissions from large herds may have helped maintain the warm conditions of the late Ice Age. Their disappearance changed the climate in deep and lasting ways. The psychological consequences for humans were no less severe. For the first time, people had to live in a world less diverse, less magnificent than the one their ancestors knew. The trajectory of nature was reversed. Instead of life forms growing more abundant through evolution, human presence simplified and impoverished the biosphere. This marked the beginning of the human epoch, the Anthropocene, not with agriculture or industry, but through the systematic removal of megafauna that had shaped the earth. For millions of years, surviving communities had to adapt not only to new survival conditions but also to a psychological reality, learning to exist in a world emptied, silent, and less wondrous. At the same time, they bore responsibility for the changes they had caused. Complex rituals and belief systems developed to cope with feelings of loss and guilt. Mythology and folklore of this period often focused on change, the consequences of human action, and the departure of great creatures. Stories of floods, vanishing giants, or the end of golden ages reflect the pain and attempts to understand the meaning of this transformation. The certainty of Ice Age life gave way to unpredictability, and the weight of responsibility for the planet's future. Yet surviving communities demonstrated extraordinary human adaptability and creativity. They transformed grief into opportunity for growth and innovation. The technologies, social structures, and cultural activities established during this period became the foundation for all subsequent progress. The abilities to adapt rapidly, innovate in the face of challenge, and maintain social cooperation were honed at this time and continue to shape human potential when facing modern challenges. The story of these megafauna-era communities is both a warning and an inspiration. They confronted extreme change and not only survived, but also laid the groundwork for all future human development. The history of life on Earth is marked not only by the vanished giants, but also by the human communities that survived, learned, and built the foundations for future generations. Their story is proof of extraordinary resilience and human creativity in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. They demonstrate that even when the environment changes drastically, humans can find opportunities to innovate, adapt, and thrive. Yet the most important lesson is not found in technology or individual skill. The key to survival lies in the ability to cooperate, maintain social bonds, and support one another even while facing the consequences of one's own actions. Communities that survived great catastrophes were those that shared resources, coordinated efforts, and stood together through the most difficult times. Looking at the modern environment, this lesson becomes even more urgent. The story of megafauna pioneers reminds us that human creativity, skill, and cooperation can overcome disaster, but only when we are willing to take responsibility for our own actions. The extinction of megafauna was not merely an ending. It marked a new chapter in the relationship between humans and the natural world. The technologies, social structures, and cultural practices formed during this crisis became the foundation for agriculture, cities, civilization, and eventually the modern world. At the same time, they remind us that every human action leaves an imprint beyond its original intent. Ice Age hunters, through skill and efficiency in hunting, inadvertently caused the extinction of species on which they depended, creating irreversible consequences even without full awareness. Fossil records continue to reveal new details about how these communities navigated one of Earth's most challenging periods. Each excavation site, each species discovered, and each new analysis adds a piece to the puzzle of how our ancestors turned crisis into opportunity, while fundamentally reshaping global ecosystems. The legacy of this transformation persists in every aspect of modern life. We live in a world emptied of giant creatures, simplified and impoverished by ancestral actions. Yet we also inherit a world reconstructed through adaptation, innovation, and the ability to devise new solutions in times of crisis. Surviving communities did not just adapt to a new environment. They learned to shape the world around them, laying the foundation for agriculture, social structures, and technologies that allowed humans to dominate the planet. They paved the way for cities, states, and eventually modern civilization. Their story is both evidence of the opportunities crises bring and a warning of responsibility. Every human choice has long-term consequences, sometimes only recognized too late. The end of the megafauna was not an ending, but the beginning of the human era and profound transformation of Earth. The skills, technologies, and social structures forged in this crisis shaped every subsequent advance, from cultivation and social organization to creating the modern world. At the same time, it serves as a reminder that dominion over nature carries responsibility, and deep transformations always require humans to confront the consequences of their own actions. A new relationship between humans and nature began to form, but this time it was no longer balanced cooperation. It was human dominance. The story of communities that survived the disappearance of megafauna is the story of how humans became the dominant species on Earth. It is a story of extraordinary innovation and adaptation, but also of loss and transformation, forces that continue to shape the world today. Children growing up in the post-megafauna world witnessed a gap in nature, world diminished and less magnificent than the one their ancestors had known. Living in this environment, they had to learn to fill those gaps, not with giant creatures, but with careful, meticulous use of the smaller resources around them. Seeds that had previously been overlooked became the foundation for complex food processing. Systems, insects once considered mere nuisances, became valuable sources of protein-sustaining communities. Remarkably, these people developed a new way of thinking about time. The Ice Age worldview was cyclical, with repeating seasons and predictions based on patterns observed over many generations. After the extinctions, the New World demanded linear planning, anticipating the future and solving problems that had never arisen in human experience. This new awareness was profound, comparable to any technological breakthrough. They began to think not only about the next hunting season, but also about the survival season of the next generation. Tools and skills no longer served immediate needs. Alone, they were aimed at teaching children the abilities necessary for years to come. Archaeological evidence indicates that these communities began experimenting with food storage and need that had not existed before. While hunting mammoths allowed for simple provisioning, gathering many small food sources to meet nutritional requirements made preservation techniques essential for survival. Methods of drying, smoking, fermenting, and processing food were developed to keep provisions fresh and durable through scarce seasons. This transformation had profound social implications. Old sharing systems, based on abundant and sporadic resources, had to be redesigned for continuous small-scale gathering. New forms of reciprocity emerged, along with systems for accounting debts, obligations, and ensuring every member contributed. To group survival, leadership became more complex. Individuals with knowledge of food sources, whether prediction or sophisticated tool-making, became essential. The role of women also changed, as knowledge of plants became critical for survival, complementing hunting skills that had been central during the megafauna era. Food processing technologies, once used for preparing temporary provisions, gradually became the foundation of daily nutrition. Social networks maintained by women across generations became vital infrastructure for resource distribution and mutual support. This period marks the emergence of the first true economic systems in human history, not only based on sharing and reciprocity as in previous Ice Age societies, but also including the calculation of value, trade, and obligations for the future. Communities began specializing in particular resources or technologies, creating early markets and forming trade relationships between groups. Art reflected this transformation as well. Cave paintings that once depicted nature realistically gradually gave way to more abstract and symbolic forms. Representations became layered and complex, capable of conveying abstract ideas and subtle emotional states. Humans appeared in art for the first time, signaling a new self-awareness of humanity's place in the world. Animals were depicted smaller but more numerous, reflecting a world now filled with smaller creatures rather than giants. Landscapes and details in the art grew more intricate, suggesting a sophisticated storytelling tradition. Musical traditions developed alongside these changes. Bone flutes, once used for communication and ritual, were replaced or supplemented by more complex instruments, producing wider ranges and intricate rhythmic patterns that reflected increasingly diverse social structures. Most notably, there is evidence of the emergence of rudimentary schooling. The informal apprenticeship system of the Ice Age was supplemented by formalized training programs, where children learned specialized skills from multiple instructors. Knowledge was no longer transmitted solely from parent to child, but shared broadly across the community. Communication systems became more sophisticated, with symbols, signals, and messages facilitating coordination over wide areas among different groups. Some studies even suggest the first appearances of writing systems. Though evidence remains fragmentary, settlement patterns changed significantly. Large semi-permanent Ice Age camps gradually gave way to more flexible communities. Some groups moved seasonally, following resources. Others focused on intensive local exploitation. Permanent settlements emerged as communities recognized the need for stability to support processing and storage infrastructure. These villages were not just residential spaces, but integrated systems for processing, storing, and distributing resources. Construction technology advanced. Mammoth bone huts were replaced with structures suited to climate and available materials. Some communities developed techniques using stone, wood, and clay, laying the groundwork for later architectural traditions. Crucially, social structures were reformed to manage conflict and encourage cooperation. Increasing population density and resource competition created social pressures, necessitating negotiation, mediation, and sophisticated alliance systems. This period saw the emergence of the first social mechanisms to balance power, ensure cooperation, and manage resources. In a profoundly changing world, legal systems began to take shape in human history, extending beyond the informal dispute resolution mechanisms of the Ice Age. Codes of conduct became more specific, accompanied by punishments for violations, reflecting efforts to organize increasingly complex societies. Archaeological records show evidence of standardized forms of punishment, justice rituals, and mechanisms for determining guilt or innocence. Spiritual and religious life also underwent profound transformation. From animal-centered foundations, beliefs expanded to include plants and landscapes, becoming more abstract and philosophical. Evidence indicates communities began conceptualizing invisible forces, spiritual realms, and life after death in ways more sophisticated than ever before. Burial rituals became complex. Bodies were interred with numerous grave goods, including tools and ornaments, reflecting deep beliefs in the afterlife and reverence for the deceased. Social stratification began to emerge. Previously egalitarian, communities gradually developed disparities in wealth and status. Some individuals were buried with significantly more possessions, indicating the rise of economic inequality. Genetics supports this story. Ice Age population bottlenecks gave way to rapid, uneven population growth. Some lineages flourished while others disappeared, suggesting that success required a specific combination of skill and resources. Trade networks also expanded dramatically. Materials and ideas moved across continents faster than ever before, creating unprecedented cultural connectivity. Yet this connectivity also introduced risk, as communities became dependent on relationships, vulnerable to environmental changes or social conflict. Technological innovation appeared rapidly. Bound arrow fishing, food processing, and preservation all developed in a short period. More importantly, communities adopted a systematic approach to innovation. Ideas were tested, successes retained, failures discarded, leading to early forms of scientific organization. Archaeological records reveal evidence of experimentation, control, and recording of results. The education system also evolved to support innovation. Children did not only learn traditional skills, they were encouraged to ask questions, experiment, and find solutions to problems. The first inventors emerged, valued for their ability to create solutions to survival challenges. These communities also developed sophisticated planning systems. They coordinated activities seasonally and across multiple years, allocated resources, and managed long-term projects, something unimaginable during the Ice Age. Most importantly, they changed their understanding of success and failure. The Ice Age worldview focused on maintaining stability and avoiding risk. The post-extinction world demanded the ability to accept failure, learn from it, and innovate in circumstances previously unknown to humans. This new attitude toward risk and failure became an essential part of innovation and growth. The ability to experiment, make mistakes, and learn from them became as important as the ability to achieve success. Communities that leveraged failures to adjust strategies and adapt to the environment had a higher chance of survival than groups clinging strictly to old traditions. This period laid the foundation for all subsequent human development. Innovations in technology, social organization, and cultural expression formed during this time became the starting point for the agricultural revolution, the emergence of cities, and modern civilization. Simultaneously, it was a profound era of transformation. In human consciousness, the intimate relationships that once existed between humans and large animals gradually gave way to a more abstract relationship with nature, system that needed to be understood and managed. Spiritual beliefs, once tied to specific places and individual creatures, became more generalized, oriented toward abstract forces and principles. The egalitarian social structures of the Ice Age began to dissolve as specialized roles and the ability to control resources grew more important. Inequalities in wealth and status emerged as certain individuals controlled key resources or technologies. Consequences of these changes extended to the environment. The disappearance of megafauna not only reduced the number of large animals, but also disrupted entire ecosystems that had been shaped over millions of years. Vast grasslands turned into forests, nutrient cycles were upended, and the climate may have been profoundly affected. The world was fundamentally altered. Humans became the dominant force in biological structures, yet faced unprecedented losses in biodiversity. The psychological consequences of this event were equally profound. For the first time, humans lived in a world less diverse, less rich, and less spectacular than that known to their ancestors. The natural trajectory was reversed. Instead of evolution producing increasing abundance, human actions simplified and impoverished the biosphere. This marked the beginning of the Anthropocene, geological epoch shaped by human impact, not starting with industrial or agricultural revolutions, but from the systematic removal of megafauna, while simultaneously creating opportunities for new social forms to emerge in an emptied world. Surviving communities had to adapt, not only to the new environment, but also to a new psychological reality. They learned to survive in a quieter, less wondrous world, while taking responsibility for the profound transformations they had caused. The story of our ancestors after the megafauna extinction is the story of humans becoming the dominant species. On Earth, it is a story of innovation, adaptation, but also of losa, story of responsibility extending across generations. Human creativity and cooperation demonstrate that communities can overcome severe environmental catastrophes. Yet it also reminds us that such profound changes always carry costs, often only visible when it is too late. The skills, technologies, and social structures created by our ancestors became the foundation for all later developments. Most importantly, their legacy is evidence of humanity's capacity for transformation, not only surviving the apocalypse, but also creating a new world, opening opportunities for innovation, adaptation, and managing the consequences of their own actions. Cooperation was no longer merely a survival strategy. It became a core human trait. Faced with existential challenges and witnessing species extinctions, our ancestors turned the seemingly impossible into the achievable. They transformed crisis into opportunity, continually believing that the future could differ from the past. These great transformations began 20,000 years ago, in the icy world of the Ice Age, and their effects continue to resonate today. Modern humans continue the process of adaptation, innovation, and cooperation, but now built on the experience and wisdom left by our ancestors. Their story is not only history, it is a guiding light. Their achievements became a legacy, teaching us about creativity, resilience, and the unshakable belief that no challenge is insurmountable through intellect and collaborative effort. The world they built from the ashes of the Ice Age became the foundation for everything that followed: agriculture, the formation of cities, writing, art, literature, and exploration of the cosmos. As the giant creatures vanished, humans learned to live in a smaller, quieter world. Yet from it emerged the opportunity to establish a new order. In doing so, they also created us. Today's humans are the result of their efforts, innovations, and accumulated knowledge. The challenges and successes of our ancestors have become our strength. Their innovations are our tools, and their understanding is our compass for navigating the future. The story of life in the Ice Age is not merely ancient history. It is the starting point of civilization, the opening chapter of a chain of human achievements, proving that no matter how dark the world, intellect and cooperation can rebuild from the ashes. 20,000 years ago, our ancestors gazed at a world threatening their survival and resolved to create a new future. They succeeded to the extent that today we almost forget how impossible it once seemed. The world we live in is their triumph. Our potential is their legacy. When the ice melted, when the giant creatures disappeared, the world changed beyond imagination, yet humans remained curious, capable, and endowed with the skill and cooperation that enabled our ancestors to survive the coldest night in history. That flame still burns within each of us, and as long as it exists, no darkness is insurmountable.